Hi, this is Debbie, and today I have what I think is my last Christmas card of the season, and I went with pencils on craft for this detailed scene. The stamp set is from a new to me company called Colorado Crafts Company, and they have a range of stamp sets which concentrate on people's legs. I thought this lovely Legs Santa is Coming set was a fun take on a traditional scene. The image is very detailed, and I first thought I would stamp it in black on watercolour card and create loose watercolour washes over the top. However, in the end I decided that I wanted to give it a go with pencils on craft instead, with a no-line colouring style. Although the tone grey card from Strathmore is more of a paper than card, I love using it for colouring pencils due to the smooth texture of the paper, and also that knockback grey appeals to me rather than a traditional warm craft colour. I place a piece of the tone grey card in the MISTI, lined up the image in the centre, and then stamped in clear embossing ink from Simon Says Stamp. I'm not going to emboss this image, but the tone-on-tone colour of this ink on the paper gives me an outlined colour and the lines disappear as you apply the pencil. It did take a few stamped impressions to get a clear outline of all that detail on this image to work with. I must admit I wasn't entirely sure I was going to be able to get the definition between one area and the next with this no-line coloured pencil look for this detailed scene, but I started out and kept going, and I love how it turned out. I'm using FABER POLYCHROMO pencils. I prefer the harder lead these pencils have in comparison to the softer Prismacolor pencils, as this enables me to get a sharp point on the pencils and they don't break as often as the Prismacolor ones. As far as colouring goes, initially with my tentative start I lightly blocked out colour in the areas, and then once I had that down I went back in to create shadows and highlights in each area. With pencils, and especially when working on small sections, I tend to start with a dark colour and work towards the highlights, using the pressure of the pencil to blend from one shade to the next. Often I'll go back in later on and deepen the shadows and add more highlights to get the impression of dimension and bring the colouring to life. It helps to have sharp pencils when colouring, so a good pencil sharpener is a must, and for no-line colouring I find it helpful to have distinct colour changes from one area to the next. So for the fireplace surround I aimed for a sandstone look, with a terracotta red brick inset and then a soot blackened wall behind the fire. So the colours from the outside of the fire inwards were quite different from one another and helped to create the definition I needed. I'll leave most of the colouring in so you can see this from start to finish, but I have sped up the video so that you won't be sitting for too long watching. I think from memory when I uploaded the video files this card took me about an hour and a half to complete. That did include distractions from children and setting things up for the camera though, so you could probably make this in a little bit quicker time than that. I am a slow crafter too and enjoy taking my time over things. I'll play some music for now, my last piece of Christmas music until next year, and I'll be back later on to finish this card off. pencils I used to colour the scene, 18 I think in total, and the Perfect Pearls brush, which is handy for sweeping away any pencil dust to keep the project clean. After colouring, I added a little bit of sparkle with some COPIC sticker pens. I have these pens in a range of colours and they are great for adding a little tone-on-tone sparkle, and I like to add them to the shadows. I also used a Sakura metallic gold pen to add detail to the buckle on Santa's boots, and also a few gold baubles on the mantle wreath. I used a white gel pen for added bright highlights, and this pen certainly helped me to get more definition on the bows of the presents, which up until that point were looking more like white blobs. I trimmed the piece down to be slightly smaller than an A2 card base, and then picked out pumice stone distress ink and a blender brush from Picket Fen Studios, and I lightly blended the ink around the edges. This colour tones particularly well with the tone grey paper and dulled the edges down, creating a vignette that focuses the eye on the central scene. I felt the piece needed a few more highlights, and so I squeezed a little white gouache on my craft mat and picked it up with a wet brush and splattered it over the panel. I guess it gives it a snowy look, which is a bit weird for an indoor scene, but I liked it, and I also used a small brush to pick up more of the gouache and dot some brighter white highlights around too. Gouache is certainly a brighter, more opaque white than the white gel pen. After I finished adding the paint, I dried the panel with a heat tool and then added foam adhesive to the back and added it to a side-folding ivory card base. I did test out a white card base, but found the ivory was a softer, more natural pairing with the toned grey. On hindsight, I thought the lovely script Merry Christmas sentiment from the Santa's Coming set would have looked great heat embossed over the fireplace. However, the From All of Us greeting also caught my eye, as there are 5 of us in our family, and that fitted well with the 5 stockings hanging in front of the fire. I took a scrap piece of ivory card and placed it in the misty, treated it with an anti-static powder bag to prevent embossing powder randomly sticking everywhere, and then stamped the sentiment in clear embossing ink before sprinkling with antique gold embossing powder from Says Stamp and heat embossing. I trimmed the sentiment to a skinny banner and added foam adhesive to the back, and adhered it to the card with the aid of a T-square ruler to ensure I had it on straight. I then added a trio of sequins around the sentiment and held them in place with Gina Connect glue. And that completes this card, using pencils to create a no-line coloured style to a detailed stamp image. I'll leave links in the YouTube description below to the products that I've used today, as well as a link to the coordinating blog post over at limedoodledesign.com. I want to thank you for joining me today, and if you've enjoyed this tutorial, I'd be delighted if you subscribe to this channel. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.